Row 10A was never supposed to matter. It was one of those middle seats in the middle of the plane, far from the glamour of first class, too close to the aisle to ignore the chaos of everyday passengers shuffling past. Yet here sat Evelyn Evie Carter, 14 years old, hoodie pulled up over her hair, headphones resting around her neck like a security blanket. Her sneakers, scuffed from constant wear, tapped lightly against the floor as she stared at the overhead compartments, pretending to listen to music but really listening to the hum of the engines. To anyone looking, she was just another kid trying to make a long flight tolerable. But there was a quiet intensity to her stare that made her seem older than she was. The kind of intensity that made the flight attendant glance at her a second time, curious, before moving on with a polite smile. Evie wasn't looking at her fellow passengers. She wasn't listening to the safety briefing. She was looking at the cockpit door just ahead, imagining the maze of controls and panels behind it. And when the plane hit its first jolt of turbulence, she didn't flinch. She recognized the pattern. The turbulence was off, not random air currents but a mechanical tremor, a subtle warning that something was deeply wrong. She wasn't scared yet. Fear was for those who didn't notice the first warning signs. Evie did. Her knuckles whitened around the armrest as the plane rattled again, this time stronger. Oxygen masks dangled from the ceiling, bouncing slightly with the tremor. A mother whispered to her child, trying to calm herself more than the kid. The flight attendants struggled to maintain calm, moving up and down the aisle, smiling with a practiced ease that didn't reach their eyes. Then it happened. A voice, muted, hurried, but unmistakable, cracked over the intercom, but not in the usual passenger-friendly tones. This was different, clinical, commanding, loaded with desperation. "Control, this is Captain Harris. We've lost redundancy in the flight systems. If anyone named Ghost is on board, we need you now." The words pierced the cabin. Passengers froze, exchanging confused glances. Someone laughed nervously, trying to make a joke out of the tension. Did he just say Ghost? Evie didn't move. Her eyes, gray and sharp, didn't blink. Her heart thudded in a rhythm she knew well, not panic, not fear, but alertness, the kind that came from training long before anyone should have been able to train her. Because Ghost wasn't a joke. It was her call sign. And hearing it again made something deep inside her awaken, a memory she had buried under layers of normalcy and pretend childhood. Her hand slid into her hoodie pocket, brushing against the small data pad she always carried. Not many knew what it contained. Not many needed to. Evie had been trained for scenarios that weren't meant for anyone under 21. She had been a child once in the Ghost Initiative, a government program that created prodigies capable of performing extraordinary feats in crisis situations. But programs like that didn't last long, and certainly didn't advertise the existence of their youngest operatives. She took a deep breath. The turbulence grew stronger, jolting the plane again. Oxygen masks fell as if mocking the calm she tried to maintain. She glanced around at the faces in her row. No one was aware of the gravity of the situation. To them, this was just another flight with a little rough air. To Evie, it was a countdown. A flight attendant brushed past, asking her to remain seated. "Honey, please sit down." Evie's gaze lifted, cold and unwavering. "I need to see the pilot now." The flight attendant hesitated. There was something about Evie, a quiet authority that didn't belong in a 14-year-old, that made her hand falter. But the door to the cockpit remained shut, and the alarms grew louder, flashing red across the panels outside the small windows. Captain Harris' voice came again, tense and clipped. "If anyone named Ghost is on board, please respond." Evie stood, moving swiftly down the aisle. The plane pitched suddenly, and a collective gasp echoed through the cabin. Passengers clutched armrests, white-knuckled. Some whispered prayers, but Evie's stride was steady, measured, like she had walked this path 100 times in simulations she wasn't supposed to remember. Reaching the cockpit door, she didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. She just said calmly, "Sir, you asked for Ghost." The door cracked open. The captain's eyes widened in disbelief. Standing before him wasn't an adult operative or an engineer. Standing there was a kid, hoodie, wrinkled hair falling into her eyes, but posture rigid, movements precise, eyes locked onto him with a familiarity that should have felt impossible. The co-pilot took a step back. "This is a child." Evie ignored him. "You need help with the override. I can handle it." Captain Harris' mouth opened, then closed. He tried to speak, but words failed him. Ghost. The name he thought vanished with the last operative in the initiative. Ghost was gone, buried, erased. "How do you know that name?" he finally managed, voice trembling slightly. Evie's lips pressed together. "Because I helped build what you're about to lose." The plane shuddered again, stronger. Passengers screamed, trays rattled, overhead compartments popped open. Somewhere a child cried. Captain Harris felt a chill run down his spine. If this girl was lying, the consequences were catastrophic. If she was telling the truth, the responsibility of 186 lives was about to fall into the hands of a child. Evie's eyes scanned the instruments, absorbing the chaos in a way that made her appear almost otherworldly. She wasn't just a kid in row 10A, she was the bridge between disaster and salvation, and she had only seconds to prove it. "Time is running out," she said, voice low but commanding. "Every second you hesitate brings us closer to failure." Captain Harris swallowed, glancing at the co-pilot who seemed frozen, unable to process what was happening. You're serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," Evie replied, stepping toward the open hatch. Her hands hovered over the emergency override panel, fingers trembling not from fear, but from anticipation. A scream echoed from the cabin as the plane dipped sharply, throwing passengers into a panic. Drinks spilled. Luggage tumbled from overhead bins. The flight attendants tried to maintain order, but their faces betrayed sheer terror. Evie didn't flinch. She had trained for moments like this, moments that no child should ever endure. Moments that, if miscalculated, would leave wreckage across the countryside and headlines the next morning. "Captain," she said softly, looking up at him, "if you want everyone to survive, step aside." The cockpit was silent except for the whine of the engines, the red glow of flashing alerts, and the faint, almost imperceptible tremor running through the fuselage. Captain Harris exhaled slowly. For the first time in his career, he realized that the fate of everyone on board didn't rest on his years of experience. It rested on row 10A. The lights of the instrument panels reflected in her eyes. The flight attendants backed away. The co-pilot whispered something he hoped she wouldn't hear. Evie Carter, a child by every visible measure, was about to become the only thing standing between life and disaster at 30,000 feet. And somewhere deep in the control systems, a hidden override protocol, one meant to be long forgotten, waited for her touch. She inhaled, steady and silent. And then her fingers moved. Passengers were frozen in confusion, their murmurs bouncing off the cabin walls like nervous echoes. Someone muttered, "Did he really say ghost?" Evie didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her eyes never left the cockpit door, and every fiber of her body was alert. Every instinct trained over years in a program that the public wasn't supposed to know existed screamed at her. This was real, and it was bad. She rose from her seat, hoodie slipping slightly over her shoulders. The flight attendants instinctively tried to block her path. "Sweetheart, please sit down. This is not for you." Evie didn't flinch. Calm, measured, her voice unwavering, she said, "I need to see the pilot, right now." The flight attendant hesitated. Something in Evie's tone, the unmistakable weight of authority in a child's voice, made her step back, unsure. Behind the cockpit door, alarms screamed in growing urgency. The passengers clutched at their armrests, unaware that their lives might already be in the hands of someone far too young to carry such responsibility, but someone trained for it anyway. Captain Harris leaned back slightly in his seat, pinching the bridge of his nose. He'd flown countless flights, managed countless emergencies, but nothing like this. A child, on my plane, and she's supposed to help. He turned to the co-pilot, trying to mask his panic. Who is she? The co-pilot shook his head. I don't know, she's just a kid. Captain Harris hesitated, then spoke into the intercom again. Miss, can you confirm your identity? Evie stepped into the cockpit doorway. I'm Ghost, you asked for me. The captain froze. Ghost? That name had haunted the corridors of classified government programs for years. It was supposed to be gone, buried along with the last operative, erased from all official records. And yet here she stood, 14 years old, hoodie wrinkled, gray eyes sharp and commanding beyond belief. The co-pilot stepped back further, disbelief and fear battling in his expression. This has to be a joke. There's no way. Captain Harris cut him off with a tense hand. Enough, let her speak. Evie didn't wait for permission. She surveyed the panels, nodding the flashing red lights and listening to the subtle hum of the failing engines. Triple cascade failure, she muttered under her breath, scanning switches and overrides. Hydraulics 2 and 3, fly-by-wire compensating, barely. Her words hit Harris like a punch. Only someone trained in the initiative would know the precise technical terminology at this level. How do you know that? He asked, his voice shaky. Evie looked at him, unflinching. So was I. The co-pilot let out a short laugh, incredulous. This is insane. You're a child. You can't. Evie cut him off with a glare. You don't understand. This isn't about me. This is about everyone on this plane. I can help, but only if you let me. Captain Harris took a shaky breath. He studied her. She looked fragile, ordinary, a kid. And yet there was an intensity there, a confidence that defied reason. Years ago, he had known about the Ghost Initiative, the secret program that trained prodigies to solve high-level crises. It had been shut down, and yet here she was, alive, active, Ghost. The plane lurched violently. Alarms screamed. Passengers shrieked, crying out in panic. Drinks spilled, children wailed, and luggage slid from overhead bins. The roar of the engines was deafening, punctuated by the warning sirens of failing systems. Evie didn't flinch. She had been in simulations far worse than this. She had survived exercises designed to break even the most experienced operatives. This was real, and she was ready. She gestured to a panel beneath the captain's seat. The manual override, it's there. You can't fix it from the cockpit alone. I can, but I need access. Captain Harris hesitated, hand hovering over the console. This child, this kid, was about to walk into a failing aircraft systems bay that no adult had touched under real conditions. Every instinct screamed at him to stop her, but instinct had never told him how to save a plane when the systems themselves were failing. The co-pilot's face turned pale. You can't let her, she's a child. This is insane. Evie's gray eyes met his, unyielding. If you want to save everyone on this plane, you have no choice. Harris swallowed hard. The alarms blared, lights flashing, warning of fuel imbalances, hydraulic pressure drops, and navigation errors. The plane dipped sharply, and a jolt threw him against his seat. The passengers screamed. Time was a cruel adversary. Seconds became milliseconds. Evie took a steadying breath, then stepped into the small hatch, kneeling down to access the maintenance panel. Her fingers, small and delicate, hovered over switches and wires that only a trained hand could recognize. The co-pilot whispered almost to himself, "This is impossible. She can't do this." Evie heard him. She didn't care. She had been trained to operate under impossibility. Her fingers danced across the controls with precision, rerouting circuits, bypassing fried processors, overriding failing systems. The plane groaned in response, stabilizing just slightly. Captain Harris's hands shook as he watched. How is she doing that? She was trained for it, Evie said softly without looking up. I'm Ghost. This is what I do. Another jolt rocked the plane, throwing passengers against their armrests. Oxygen masks bounced overhead, and a baby cried inconsolably somewhere in the cabin. Harris realized in that moment that the survival of every single person on this plane rested in the hands of a child. A prodigy who had been hidden away, erased from existence, but now alive and standing in front of him. Evie's fingers flew over switches, her brow furrowed. Hydraulics 2 and 3 rerouted, flight control restored, but only temporarily. We need full stabilization now. Captain Harris's jaw tightened. You can't be serious. This is dangerous. She's a kid. Evie's eyes never left the panel. Dangerous? Yes. Impossible? Never. Now move aside or we all die. For a moment the cabin seemed to hold its breath. Passengers screamed, bags tumbled. A flight attendant tried to calm a hysterical woman. Outside the windows, clouds whipped past, the plane buffeted by turbulence. But it wasn't just turbulence. It was a plane struggling against its own systems. Evie exhaled, focused. Every motion precise, every decision calculated. Her hands, though small, moved with authority and speed, rerouting power, realigning stabilizers, correcting flight paths manually. The co-pilot whispered, I've never seen anything like this. She's fixing it. Captain Harris's throat went dry. This is beyond any protocol, beyond any manual. She shouldn't exist, and yet here she is. Evie's voice cut through the alarms. Almost there, just a few more adjustments, rerouting energy through the auxiliary backup. A flash of red light swept across the cockpit as one last system tremor threatened to undo all of her work. She froze for a split second, assessing, calculating. Her small fingers flew again, reconnecting circuits, overriding a failing fly-by-wire signal. The plane leveled just enough. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to buy them time. Harris exhaled, relief washing over him. But Evie didn't relax. She had already felt the next problem forming, fuel pressure imbalances, a system error that no one else had anticipated. Captain, she said softly, voice laced with urgency, this isn't over. I can stabilize the plane, but we need to act fast. Seconds matter. He looked at her, realizing that row 10A was no longer just a seat on a plane. It was the epicenter of hope. The passengers screamed somewhere behind him. Drinks spilled. Children cried. A man clutched the arm of the seat in front of him, muttering prayers. And yet none of them understood the gravity of what was happening inches away, how a 14-year-old prodigy, erased from the world, now held the fate of 186 lives in her hands. Evie's eyes met Captain Harris's, gray and piercing. If you want everyone to survive, you have to trust me, fully. The plane jolted again, violently, as if testing him. Harris felt the weight of the choice crushing him. Every second of hesitation could mean disaster. He swallowed, nodding slowly. Do it. Whatever it takes, just save us. Evie nodded, her small frame tense with focus. Her hands moved again, almost dancing over the controls beneath the captain's seat, her mind racing through protocols, failures, and the impossible decisions she had been trained to make. Outside, the plane shuddered, dipping, climbing, buffeted by invisible forces. Inside, a child in row 10A had become more than a passenger. She had become the last line of defense. And somewhere deep inside, a hidden override, a protocol buried and forgotten, waited for her touch. Her fingers hovered over it, steady. The fate of the plane, and everyone on it, was about to change. The cockpit hummed with alarms and flashing lights, red dominating the soft glow of the instrument panels. Captain Harris couldn't take his eyes off her. Evie Ghost was kneeling in the maintenance hatch beneath his seat, fingers flying across switches, wires, and panels that even he, a seasoned pilot, had never touched in real life. Every movement was deliberate, precise, almost mechanical, but there was a human edge to her focus. the kind that came from fear, training, and necessity fused into one. The co-pilot swallowed hard, shaking his head. This is impossible. She's a child. Evie didn't look up. I'm aware of that, but the plane doesn't care about age. Captain Harris's voice trembled slightly. Why do you know this? What is this program? Evie straightened for a moment, gray eyes piercing through the cockpit chaos. The Ghost Initiative, you remember. The co-pilot blinked. That program was shut down years ago, all records erased. They said the children were gone. Evie's lips pressed into a thin line. We weren't gone. We were buried, hidden, erased from the public, yes, but alive, trained, ready. She returned her focus to the panels. Alarms screamed in her ears and the plane shuddered violently. Hydraulics 2 and 3 are failing. Fly-by-wire is barely compensating. We have roughly 30 seconds before the auxiliary systems can't handle the load. That's if we're lucky. Harris could hardly breathe. You were in that program. Evie didn't answer immediately. Her fingers moved like lightning over the small panels beneath his seat. Yes, and yes, I know every contingency, every override, every hidden fail-safe, because I designed them, all of them, for situations just like this. The co-pilot's voice shook. You designed the plane's emergency overrides. Evie's gray eyes finally met his. Not just the plane, flight systems, simulations, contingency protocols that no adult was supposed to know. I was the only one they trusted with it. Captain Harris's throat tightened. They trained a child for this, and it was legal. Evie gave a humorless smile. Legal? I doubt it. Effective? Absolutely, and right now, we don't have time for legality. The plane bucked sharply, throwing the co-pilot into his seatbelt. Oxygen masks bounced overhead. The passengers screamed, and Evie ignored the chaos, almost unaware of it. Her focus was singular, the failing systems. Auxiliary power is holding, but barely, she muttered. If we don't reroute manually, hydraulics 2 and 3 will seize completely. Control surfaces will fail. Harris's mind raced. The thought that this child had been trained to do what no adult could made him question everything he had believed about the initiative. Why did they shut it down? He asked. Evie hesitated. A flash of memory crossed her face. Long nights in simulator rooms, flashing alarms, instructors barking orders she didn't fully understand, missions where a wrong decision meant disaster. Because it's dangerous, unethical, people died, too many people, too young, too reckless. The government buried it, pretended it never existed. Her voice softened just for a fraction of a second, and then I disappeared. The co-pilot leaned back, shaking. This is impossible. You're what, 14? Evie's voice was calm but deadly serious. 14, and the only one who can save this plane. Captain Harris felt the weight of it. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the controls. The plane lurched violently again. Can you actually fix this? Evie's fingers danced across the wiring beneath his seat, connecting circuits no one else could see, rerouting power, overriding sensors, stabilizing hydraulics. Slowly, the plane leveled, just enough to ease the panic in the cabin, just enough to buy them time. Almost there, she muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. Her small hands worked quickly, perfectly synchronized with the mechanical heartbeat of the aircraft. Harris's jaw went slack. I don't understand. How are you doing this? There's no manual for this. No one's supposed to know it exists. Evie's gray eyes flicked up at him. That's because I made it. The co-pilot's voice cracked. You designed the emergency overrides, a child. Evie's lips curved into a grim smile. Not a child, Ghost, and if I fail, everyone dies. Another jolt rocked the plane. Outside, the clouds raced past like molten metal, turbulence slamming the fuselage. Panic echoed through the cabin, but here in the cockpit, the only sound was the low hum of the engines, the high-pitched alarms, and the tiny, precise clicks of Evie's fingers flying over controls. Hydraulics stabilizing, temporarily, she said. We've bought maybe 30 seconds if the systems cooperate. Harris exhaled, trying to calm his racing heart. 30 seconds, what then? Evie's fingers froze over the panel. A warning light blinked red. Fuel imbalance. One of the wing valves had jammed. She swallowed. That wasn't supposed to happen. Not yet. The system wasn't designed for this failure. Harris felt dread sinking into his chest. Even Ghost isn't omnipotent. He realized for the first time just how fragile their survival was. The child in front of him could do the impossible, but only so much. Evie looked at him, her small face pale but resolute. We need manual intervention. I can't fix this from here. You'll have to follow my instructions perfectly. One wrong move and we're done. He swallowed, voice tight. You're asking me to trust a child with the controls of my plane, with 186 people on board. Her gray eyes bore into him. If you don't, they all die. If you do, maybe, just maybe, they survive. The co-pilot's hands shook as he gripped his seat. This is insane. A child. Not a child, Evie interrupted sharply. Ghost, remember that. Time compressed around them. The plane shuddered again, tilting sharply to the right as turbulence hit and the failing systems tried to wrest control. Evie's fingers moved faster, rerouting hydraulics, overriding sensors, compensating for failing systems, rerouting auxiliary power. The plane leveled just slightly, enough to prevent catastrophe but far from safe. Captain Harris realized with growing horror that the child in front of him was the only reason the plane hadn't already gone down. She was manipulating systems designed for adults, manipulating code and circuitry that hadn't been touched in years, and doing so with the calm precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times, even if she was technically too young to have lived through a tenth of them. The alarm screamed again, the plane tilted, oxygen masks bounced, passengers screamed and clutched armrests. Evie's hands never wavered. Auxiliary routing complete, she said softly. Hydraulics stable for now, wing pressure normalizing almost. The plane shuddered violently, and Harris realized with horror that a critical component was on the verge of total failure. Evie's jaw tightened. This next step, it's why the program was shut down. No child should ever have to do this. Harris swallowed, voice tight. Then why are you doing it? Her gray eyes met his. Because it's us or everyone on board, and I don't accept losing any more lives that could be saved. She reached for the manual override switches, small fingers steady despite the sweat and tremors running through her body. The plane shuddered beneath them, engines straining. Outside, clouds whipped past like liquid chaos. Inside, the cabin was a cacophony of fear. But in the maintenance hatch beneath the captain's seat, Evie Carter, Ghost, was calm, precise, determined. And for the first time in years, the Ghost Initiative had shown the world exactly why it had existed. Captain Harris realized he had no choice but to follow her instructions. Every other path led to disaster. And the plane, straining against failing systems and turbulence, hung in the balance. Seconds stretched, eternity condensed. And Ghost's small hands moved once more. The cockpit was chaos incarnate. Red lights flashed across the panels like a warning heartbeat, alarms shrieked in a discordant chorus, and the low thrum of engines struggling under duress rattled the fuselage. Captain Harris gripped the controls, knuckles white, sweat dripping down his temple. The co-pilot sat frozen, eyes wide, muttering prayers he hadn't believed in for decades. Beneath them, in the cramped maintenance hatch, Evie Carter, Ghost, was kneeling, her small hands hovering over the labyrinth of wires and switches like a pianist poised above ivory keys. Each motion was deliberate, precise, calculated to the millisecond. The plane trembled violently as it dropped several hundred feet, then clawed back to stability. Every second felt like a lifetime. "Captain," Evie said, voice low but commanding, "hydraulics 2 and 3 are only marginally stabilized. Control surfaces are at 35% efficiency. If we don't reroute manually, the ailerons will seize and will roll uncontrollably. Harris swallowed hard. You're asking me to let you handle systems no adult can touch, a child. Not a child, she interrupted sharply, gray eyes locking onto his. Ghost, remember that. If I fail, everyone dies. If I succeed, they might live. The plane lurched again, sharper this time, tilting violently. A scream echoed from the cabin as a coffee cup flew across the aisle. Harris gritted his teeth. He knew she was right. The plane needed her. The passengers needed her. Evie's fingers danced across the manual override panel beneath his seat. Sparks flickered as circuits overloaded, wires shivering under the strain. The auxiliary systems groaned in protest, but she didn't hesitate. She couldn't. Diverting power to hydraulics too, rerouting sensors through auxiliary feed, compensating for failing fly-by-wire. Her voice was a steady hum against the chaos. Almost there, just a few more adjustments. The co-pilot leaned forward, horrified. She's actually doing it. How? This shouldn't be possible. Evie's eyes didn't waver. It's possible because it has to be. There's no other choice. Captain Harris exhaled shakily. I don't understand how this isn't legal. None of this is legal. Evie's lips curved into a grim, humorless smile. Legal doesn't save lives, Captain. Action does. Another violent jolt shook the plane, throwing Harris against the console. The wings flexed dangerously. The sensors were flickering red. Fuel pressure warnings screamed. The passengers' screams intensified, a chorus of panic that echoed throughout the cabin. Evie ignored it all. Her focus was singular. The failing systems beneath her hands, the balance of flight teetering on her tiny shoulders. Auxiliary routing complete, she murmured. Hydraulics partially stable. Wing pressure normalizing, but only temporarily. If the wing valve jams completely, we'll lose lift. Harris felt cold dread settle in his chest. Even Ghost, his mind refused to call her a child now, was reaching the limit of what was humanly possible. And yet, the plane demanded more. It demanded everything she had. Evie glanced at him briefly. Captain, I need you to follow my instructions exactly. Every lever, every control. One wrong move and we're done. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I trust you. Good, she said, because trust is all we have left. She returned to the panel. Sparks flared as she rerouted the power grid manually. The metal panels vibrated under her hands. Sweat poured down her face, dripping onto the wires she had memorized and tested countless times in simulations she wasn't supposed to remember. Every connection mattered. Every second counted. The co-pilot muttered under his breath, I can't believe this. She's a child. Evie's gaze cut to him. Not a child, Ghost. If you keep thinking of me as a child, we all die. Time became elastic. Seconds stretched, distorted. The plane pitched again violently. Oxygen masks bounced overhead. The passengers screamed, crying, clutching anything they could hold onto. Beneath the cockpit, Evie's small frame tensed. Her hands were moving faster now, recalibrating circuits, reconnecting a failing stabilizer, rerouting the auxiliary power feed and overriding the failing sensors, all in perfect synchronicity. She could feel the strain in the plane's metal, the hum of the engines, the heartbeat of the aircraft itself. It was almost alive, and it was fighting them. Captain, she said, her voice steady but with an edge of urgency, we have less than 20 seconds before the valve fully jams. We'll lose lift. I need you to pull the manual override lever when I tell you. Not a second earlier, not a second later. Harris nodded. His hands were clammy on the controls. He had flown thousands of hours, faced emergencies, and survived situations others would have panicked at, but this was different. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't theory. This was a 14-year-old holding the life of every passenger on this plane in her hands. The plane tilted again violently, the wings flexed. Sparks flew from the auxiliary panel as Evie worked. The vibration ran up her arms. Her hands were small, not ideal, not suited for industrial-level mechanical overrides, but they moved with precision, unyielding, unstoppable. "Now," she commanded. Harris pulled the lever. The plane groaned as hydraulic systems realigned, engines responded, and the failing wing valve began to release. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tilt began to correct. Passengers screamed less as the aircraft leveled slightly. Evie exhaled, but only slightly. She was far from done. The auxiliary systems were stressed, overheating. Every circuit she had rerouted was burning at its limit. The plane shuddered again, and a warning alarm shrieked louder than before. "Captain," she said, voice taut with tension, "fuel imbalance next. If you don't follow my instructions perfectly, the left wing will stall. We're not out of danger yet." Harris glanced at her, panic and awe mixing in his eyes. You designed these override procedures." Evie's gray eyes held his. "Yes, and I tested every scenario, every possible failure, every system compromise. But nothing prepares you for the real thing. That's why I need you to act exactly as I say." The co-pilot was pale, trembling. "This is insane. She shouldn't exist. None of this should exist." Evie looked at him, deadly serious. "It does, and right now it's saving lives. Understand that or we all die." The plane lurched again. Sparks flew from the auxiliary panels. Metal groaned. Passengers screamed. A mother clutched her child, rocking back and forth, praying aloud. Evie worked faster, rerouting fuel lines, recalibrating sensors, realigning hydraulics. The plane leveled slightly. Not fully, but enough to buy them precious seconds. "Almost there," she whispered. Sweat dripped into her eyes, stinging, but she didn't stop. Every motion, every connection, every rerouted circuit mattered. Captain Harris's chest heaved. He realized with dawning terror that he had no choice but to trust her fully. Every hesitation, every doubt could cost them their lives. And this child, no ghost, was their only chance. Another jolt shook the fuselage, violently tipping the plane. Evie's small hands remained firm. She was calm, precise, and resolute despite the chaos around her. "Hydraulics stable, fuel routing in progress, wing pressure normalizing," she murmured. Then her eyes flicked up at Harris, sharp and commanding. "We're not safe yet. The systems are holding, but they won't last. We need to stabilize fully, and for that, I'll need the manual override fully engaged. Once again." Harris nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. He could feel the tremor in the plane, the strain on every component. Outside, the clouds whipped past like molten chaos. Inside, Row 10A was the epicenter of salvation. Evie's small hands hovered over the final switches, steady despite the sweat, the fear, the chaos. This was the moment. Every passenger, every life depended on her. And somehow, improbably, she was ready. She took a deep breath and pressed the final override. Evie's fingers hovered over the final manual override switches, her small hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from sheer physical and mental strain. Sweat slicked her forehead, dripping into her eyes, but she didn't blink. Not yet. The plane groaned as if protesting the impossible load she had placed upon it. Captain Harris exhaled shakily, gripping the controls with white-knuckled intensity. "Ghost, how long can this last?" he asked, voice tight, almost a whisper. Evie's gray eyes, sharp and calculating, flicked up at him. "Long enough to tell you the truth," she said softly. "The Ghost Initiative wasn't just about saving planes. It was about pushing human limits. We were trained to do what adults couldn't: override failures, manipulate systems manually, fly machines beyond safety margins." The co-pilot's eyes widened in disbelief. "Adults, they let children do this. That's insane." Evie shook her head. "It was necessary, and it was dangerous, unethical. That's why the program was shut down. Too many of us were pushed too far. People died. And I disappeared because I refused to continue. The plane lurched violently and passengers screamed. Drinks flew, oxygen masks bounced, and the cabin erupted in panic. Harris felt his chest tighten. Every second the strain on the plane intensified. Systems groaned. Alarms blared. Sparks flickered from auxiliary panels. Evie's fingers danced across the manual override switches. Hydraulics are holding temporarily. Wing pressure is stabilizing. But the fuel imbalance, that's the real problem. Harris's brow furrowed. The fuel imbalance, what do you mean? Evie exhaled, a quiet edge of frustration in her voice. One of the wing valves is jammed. If it snaps, we lose lift. The plane will roll uncontrollably. I can stabilize it, but only if I bypass the safety limits manually. That's why they shut the program down. No child should ever be asked to do this. Her eyes flicked to the co-pilot. This is why it was erased. This is why the world was never supposed to know Ghost existed. We were weapons, Captain, tools. And I refuse to be that anymore. But right now, everyone on this plane depends on me being that tool. Harris's stomach churned. You're asking me to let you override limits that could destroy the plane to save it. Evie nodded, unwavering. Exactly. There's no room for hesitation. One wrong move and we're done, but if I succeed, we survive. The plane groaned under the strain. Sparks flared from the auxiliary feed as the systems teetered on the edge of failure. The engines whined, wings flexed, and the fuselage vibrated violently. The passengers screamed, unaware of the impossible calculations being made inches away, unaware of the child saving them. Evie took a deep breath. Captain, I need you to listen carefully. When I tell you, engage the manual override fully. Timing is everything. 1 second too early, 1 second too late, and we lose control. Harris nodded, hands trembling. I trust you. She returned her focus to the panel beneath his seat. Her fingers moved lightning fast, rerouting circuits, reconnecting sensors, stabilizing hydraulics, and compensating for the failing fuel valve. Sparks flew. Metal groaned. Every movement mattered. The plane tilted sharply to the left, wings flexing dangerously. Fuel pressure stabilizing, almost there, Evie murmured. Her voice was calm, precise, a counterpoint to the chaos. Just a few more adjustments, recalibrating auxiliary feed, rerouting to wing valves. The co-pilot whispered, horrified. This is insane. She's actually doing it. A child saving the plane. Evie's gray eyes flicked up at him. Not a child, Ghost. If you keep thinking of me as a child, we all die. Harris's heart pounded. The plane tilted violently again, sparks raining from the auxiliary panels. Passengers screamed. A mother clutched her child, rocking back and forth, praying aloud. The cabin shook with every movement, but Evie remained focused, almost eerily calm. Hydraulics stable, fuel routing in progress, wing pressure normalizing, she murmured. Then her eyes flicked back to Harris. Captain, we're not safe yet. The auxiliary systems are stressed. If I push them any further, they might fail entirely. But if I don't, the left wing stalls. Harris's chest tightened. So what now? Evie's jaw set. Now, we do what the initiative trained me to do. I bypass the remaining safety limits manually. Full override. I won't survive the physical strain, but the plane might. Harris froze. You'll what? Evie's small hands hovered over the switches. I'll do what no child should ever do, but it's the only way. The plane pitched violently. Passengers screamed. Drinks spilled. Luggage tumbled from overhead bins. Evie's hands moved with precision, overriding the final safety limits, rerouting every system through auxiliary feeds, recalibrating hydraulics, stabilizing the wing valves. Sparks flew. Alarms screamed. Metal groaned. The aircraft trembled as if protesting every action she took. Almost there, she whispered. Her body shook from exertion. Sweat poured down her face. Her small fingers moved faster, reconnecting circuits, recalibrating sensors, and rerouting power. Harris watched in awe and terror. He realized that every second of hesitation, every ounce of doubt could cost them their lives. And this child, no ghost, was doing the impossible. Manual override engaged, fuel pressure stabilized, wing pressure normalized, she murmured. The plane leveled slightly, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to prevent immediate disaster. Evie exhaled, exhausted but focused. We've bought time, that's all we can do for now. But the next challenge is keeping it steady until landing, and that's where you come in, Captain. Follow my instructions exactly. Harris nodded, swallowing hard. He felt the weight of every life on this plane pressing down on him. Every passenger, every child, every adult depended on this 14-year-old prodigy who had been erased from history. Captain, Evie said softly, this isn't just about flying a plane. It's about survival. We make it through this together. Harris exhaled, realizing she was right. They had no other choice. The co-pilot whispered, awestruck, I've never seen anything like this. She's amazing. Evie's gray eyes flicked to him. Not amazing, necessary. The plane groaned again, but this time it held steady. The passengers screamed less, unsure why the turbulence hadn't thrown them from their seats. Outside, the clouds whipped past like molten chaos. Inside, row 10A was the epicenter of salvation. Evie leaned back slightly, finally allowing herself a breath. For now, we're alive, but the systems are stressed beyond design. One more major failure and we're finished. We need to stabilize fully, and for that, I'll need the captain's full trust. No hesitation, no doubts. Do you understand? Harris swallowed. I understand fully. Evie's small hands hovered over the final switches, trembling with exhaustion. She had pushed her body to the limits, her mind racing through every protocol, every contingency. The plane waited, teetering on the edge of disaster, for the moment she would act again. She took a deep breath, and then pressed the final sequences. The cockpit was a war zone. Red warning lights blazed across every panel. Alarms shrieked with a deafening urgency. The engines groaned, and the fuselage trembled violently as the plane struggled to hold altitude. Captain Harris gripped the controls so tightly his knuckles ached. The co-pilot sat paralyzed, pale, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what was unfolding. And beneath them, in the cramped maintenance hatch, Evie Carter, Ghost, was kneeling, sweat streaming down her face, hair plastered to her forehead, small fingers moving impossibly fast over the labyrinth of circuits, switches, and wires. Hydraulics holding just barely, she muttered, her voice taut with concentration. Auxiliary systems are overheating. Fuel pressure is fluctuating. If we don't stabilize it within 10 seconds, we risk a catastrophic stall. Harris's heart pounded. 10 seconds, he breathed. 10 seconds to prevent a crash. Evie didn't answer immediately. Her eyes scanned every panel, every readout, every flashing red warning. Each one was a potential disaster, each one a life-or-death decision. She could feel the strain in the plane, the tension in every metal joint, the vibration running up through the fuselage. The aircraft was screaming under the weight of its failing systems. Captain, she said finally, voice low and commanding, I need you to follow my instructions perfectly. One mistake and we're done. Are you ready? Harris nodded, swallowing hard. I'm ready. Good. Step 1. Disengage auxiliary feed manually on my mark. Her gray eyes locked onto his, unwavering, commanding. Step 2. Reroute hydraulics through manual override. Step 3. Stabilize wing valves. Step 4. Pray we don't lose the fuel line. The co-pilot whispered under his breath, trembling. This is insane. She's a child. She can't. Evie's glare cut through him like ice. Not a child, Ghost, and right now your panic won't save anyone. Another violent jolt rocked the plane. Oxygen masks bounced. Passengers screamed, gripping armrests, clinging to anything stationary. Drinks flew. Bags tumbled from overhead bins. Somewhere a child wailed uncontrollably. Evie ignored it all. Her focus was singular, the failing systems beneath her hands. Every motion was precise. Every decision mattered. A miscalculation now would mean disaster. 3, 2, 1 now, she commanded. Harris pulled the lever. Sparks flew from the auxiliary feed. Metal groaned. The engines whined under the sudden shift in load. The plane pitched violently, then stabilized just slightly, enough to buy them a few precious seconds. Hydraulics partially stabilized. Wing valves realigned, fuel pressure normalized temporarily, Evie murmured, fingers flying over the panel. But it won't hold for long. We need to stabilize fully or the left wing stalls and we roll uncontrollably. The co-pilot swallowed hard. She's actually doing it, she's saving us. Evie's gray eyes flicked to him, deadly serious. Not saving, stabilizing, and barely. One more failure and we're finished. Understand that. Harris nodded, white-knuckled. I understand fully. The plane shuddered violently. Sparks flew from the auxiliary panels. The fuselage vibrated. Passengers screamed, some crying, some praying, some frozen in disbelief. Evie's small hands moved faster, overriding the final safety limits manually. She rerouted power, recalibrated sensors, stabilized hydraulics, and adjusted wing valves, all in perfect synchronicity. Every connection mattered. Every second counted. Almost there, she whispered. Sweat dripped into her eyes, stinging, but she didn't stop. The strain on her small body was immense. Her arms shook. Her fingers ached. But she couldn't falter. Not now. Not when lives hung in the balance. Harris glanced at her, awe and terror in his eyes. You've done the impossible. How are you still functioning? Evie didn't answer immediately. Her focus was on the plane, every system, every alarm, every potential failure. Finally, she spoke, voice low but resolute. Because there's no other option. Survival isn't a choice. It's a requirement. And right now, we all survive or none of us do. Another jolt rocked the plane, sharper than before. The wing flexed dangerously. Sparks flew from the auxiliary feed. The engine screamed. The passengers screamed. Evie's body tensed. Fuel line pressure dropping. Wing valves overheating. Hydraulics at 40% efficiency, she reported, voice taut. If we don't stabilize fully within 5 seconds, we risk total failure. Harris's chest tightened. 5 seconds, 5 seconds to save everyone. Evie nodded, gray eyes steely. No hesitation, follow my instructions, trust me. The co-pilot whispered, I've never seen anything like this. A child saving a plane. Evie's glare cut him off. Not a child, ghost, focus. The plane lurched violently, throwing Harris against the controls. He gritted his teeth, clinging on. Sparks flew. The fuselage trembled. Outside, clouds whipped past like molten chaos. Inside, chaos reigned, but in the maintenance hatch, Evie's hands moved with impossible speed and precision. Manual override fully engaged, hydraulics stabilized. Wing valves realigned, fuel line pressure normalized. Temporary stabilization achieved, she murmured, voice calm but strained. Her body shook from exhaustion. Sweat poured down her face, dripping onto the wires and panels. The plane leveled slightly. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to prevent immediate disaster. The passengers screamed less, unsure why the turbulence hadn't thrown them from their seats. Harris exhaled shakily. We're alive for now. Evie leaned back slightly, gasping. Her body trembled from exertion. Her small hands were raw, scraped from contact with sharp edges, bruised from the physical strain. She had pushed herself to the absolute limit, and she wasn't done yet. Captain, she said softly, voice hoarse, this isn't over. Systems are stabilized temporarily, but they're holding at maximum stress. Any further failures and we're finished. We need to land. And we need precision, absolute precision. Harris nodded, swallowing hard. I understand. We follow your instructions exactly. Evie's gray eyes locked onto his. Good, Because from here on, one mistake, one hesitation, and everyone dies, including me. The plane groaned again, violently. Sparks rained from the auxiliary panels. The fuselage trembled under strain. The passengers screamed. Evie's small body shook, but her focus was unwavering. She was the only thing standing between life and disaster at 30,000 feet. And for the first time, the full weight of responsibility pressed on her. Ghost wasn't just a name anymore. It was a life or death sentence, and she would carry it to the very end. The cockpit was bathed in a red haze, the alarms a constant wail in the confined space. The fuselage trembled under the strain of failing systems, each jolt echoing through the cabin like a drumbeat of imminent catastrophe. Captain Harris's hands were white-knuckled on the controls, his knuckles raw, sweat streaking down his face. The co-pilot sat frozen, eyes wide, whispering prayers he hadn't believed in for decades. And beneath them, in the cramped maintenance hatch, Evie Carter, Ghost, was kneeling, small hands flying over switches, circuits, and wires with the speed and precision of a master engineer, every motion a battle against time itself. Hydraulics at 55%, fuel pressure stable temporarily, wing valves recalibrated, temporary stabilization achieved, she muttered, voice taut with exhaustion. Sweat dripped into her eyes, stinging, but she ignored it. The plane wasn't safe yet. Captain Harris swallowed hard. Ghost, how much longer can we hold like this? Evie's gray eyes locked onto his. Not long. Every system is at maximum stress. Any further failure and we risk a total collapse. I need you to trust me completely for the final override. One hesitation and we're done. Harris's chest tightened. I trust you fully. Good, she said. Her voice was steady, unwavering. Because we're about to do what the initiative designed, but what no one else should ever have to do. The final override, it will push the plane beyond every safety limit. The fuselage, engines, hydraulics, everything. But if it works, we land alive. The co-pilot whispered, pale and shaking. A child, a 14-year-old. She's going to push this plane beyond safe limits. Evie's glare cut through him like ice. Not a child, Ghost, and if you doubt me now, we all die. The plane lurched violently. Sparks flew from auxiliary panels. Oxygen masks bounced in the cabin. Passengers screamed, some crying, some clutching anything they could hold onto. The turbulence threatened to throw them from their seats, but beneath it all, Ghost remained calm, focused, resolute. Captain, she said, voice sharp, commanding, I need you to follow my instructions exactly. One misstep, one fraction of a second too soon or too late, and we lose control. Understand? Harris swallowed, nodding. I understand fully. Good. First step, disengage auxiliary routing completely. Then reroute hydraulics through manual override. Third, engage wing valve compensation. Fourth, full fuselage load redistribution. Timing is everything. Evie's small hands hovered over the switches. She took a deep breath, eyes scanning every panel, every readout. Sweat poured down her face, but her focus was unwavering. Her body trembled from exhaustion, her arms ached, fingers raw and bruised, but she didn't stop. Not now. Not when the lives of everyone on this plane depended on her. 3, 2, 1, now, she commanded. Harris pulled the lever. Sparks flew from the auxiliary feed. Metal groaned. The engine screamed under the sudden shift in load. The plane pitched violently, then leveled slightly, just enough to buy precious seconds. Hydraulics stabilized, wing valves compensating, fuel pressure holding, temporary stabilization achieved, Evie murmured, voice calm but strained. Her body shook from the effort. She had pushed herself to the absolute limit, and she wasn't done yet. The co-pilot whispered, awestruck, She's actually doing it. How is she still functioning? Evie's gray eyes flicked to him. Because there's no other option. Survival isn't a choice, it's a requirement. Another violent jolt rocked the plane, sparks flew. The fuselage vibrated, the engines whined, passengers screamed. Evie's small body tensed, her fingers flying faster than humanly possible, overriding the final safety limits manually. Every motion mattered. Every second counted. Almost there, recalibrating auxiliary feed, redistributing fuselage load, stabilizing wing pressure, she whispered, sweat stinging her eyes. Captain Harris's hands shook. You've done the impossible. How are you still alive? Evie didn't answer immediately. Her focus was on the plane, every system, every alarm, every potential failure. Finally, she spoke, voice low but resolute. Because I have to be. Because if I falter, everyone dies. And I won't let that happen. The plane lurched violently again. Sparks flew. The fuselage trembled. The engines screamed. Passengers cried out, some praying, some screaming, some frozen in disbelief. Hydraulics holding, fuel pressure stable, wing valves aligned, auxiliary feed rerouted, final override almost complete, she murmured. Her small hands were raw, scraped from contact with sharp edges, bruised from the physical strain. Sweat poured down her face, her hoodie soaked, her hair plastered to her forehead. Captain, the final step, full load redistribution. We push the plane beyond every safety limit, beyond every design parameter. If it works, we land. If not, her voice faltered for the first time, a whisper of fear. We die. Harris swallowed hard. I trust you fully, do it. Evie nodded, taking a deep breath. Every ounce of her strength, every memory, every ounce of training, every instinct from the initiative. It all culminated in this moment. Her fingers moved over the switches, overriding, rerouting, redistributing. The plane groaned, trembled, screamed. The engine strained, the fuselage vibrated violently, alarms shrieked. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the plane began to stabilize. Harris's heart pounded. It's holding, it's working. Not yet, Evie whispered, teeth gritted, sweat pouring down her face. We hold this until we land. The plane leveled, just slightly, enough for temporary relief. Passengers were still terrified, clutching their seats, screaming, crying, but alive. Evie leaned back slightly, exhausted, body trembling, but eyes still sharp, gray, commanding. For now, we're alive. But one more failure and we're done. We need a landing strategy, and fast. Captain Harris realized the magnitude of what had just happened. A 14-year-old prodigy, erased from history, had manually stabilized a plane at 30,000 feet with failing systems. She had pushed herself to the absolute limit, and she had saved them all. The co-pilot whispered, awestruck, I can't believe it, she's incredible. Evie's glare cut him off. Not incredible, necessary, and barely enough. The plane trembled again, but this time the systems held. Evie's hands hovered over the final switches, body shaking, sweat pouring, bruises and scrapes visible. But for the first time, the red haze of panic in the cockpit was fading. Captain Harris took a deep breath, voice hoarse. Ghost, you saved us. Evie's gray eyes met his. For now. But the real challenge is getting us safely to the ground. That's where every second counts. And that, Captain, is where you and I work together. Trust me fully. Harris nodded, swallowing hard. Fully, I trust you. Evie exhaled, exhausted but resolute as the plane stabilized, the passengers still screaming but alive. The final override had worked, barely, but it had bought them precious time. And now, row 10A, the small maintenance hatch where a child once sat unseen, had become the epicenter of survival. The fate of 186 lives rested in the hands of a 14-year-old girl named Ghost. And for the first time, she allowed herself a brief, trembling smile. The plane trembled, groaning under the stress of a battle it was never designed to endure. Captain Harris's hands gripped the controls like his life depended on it, because it did. Every passenger aboard this steel bird, every mother, father, child, and elderly traveler, depended on him following the instructions of a girl they couldn't even see, hidden beneath the cockpit in a maintenance hatch. Evie Carter, Ghost, was still kneeling there, small and unassuming to any casual observer but monumental in action. Her gray eyes flicked from panel to panel, fingers moving at impossible speed, sweat dripping onto the wires, her hoodie soaked, her body trembling from the strain. She had manually stabilized every system, rerouted fuel, recalibrated hydraulics, and overridden safety limits far beyond any normal human capacity. She was exhausted, bruised, and raw, but alive. "Captain," she said, voice hoarse, "we're clear for the approach. Systems are holding for now, but one mistake and we risk everything. Follow my instructions to the letter." Harris swallowed hard, nodding. "I'm ready fully." Evie's gaze hardened. "Good. Descend at 180 knots. Maintain 2,500 feet above ground until I confirm auxiliary systems are balanced. Then flare at 50 feet. Timing is critical. You hesitate, half a second, and we'll cartwheel." Harris's chest tightened. His hands shook. You're doing what no adult could do. How are you still functioning?" Evie's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because I have to. Lives depend on it, not just passengers but the initiative, all the training. All the years they tried to erase me, they failed. I am here, and I will not let them or anyone die today." The co-pilot whispered, pale and trembling. "A 14-year-old, she's saving a plane, she's a miracle." Evie's glare cut through him. Not a miracle, necessary and barely enough. Harris swallowed, pushing the plane into a steady descent. Sparks flickered from the auxiliary panels, but the systems remained balanced, fragile, like a glass sculpture swaying in the wind. "Altitude 2,500 feet, stabilize," Evie commanded. "Check all hydraulic pressure, wing valves, fuel lines, everything. Confirmed." "Confirmed," Harris replied, voice tight. "Good, now flare at 50 feet, slowly. Do not overcompensate." Harris followed her instructions with trembling hands. The runway appeared through the clouds, blurred and gray, like a lifeline reaching out from the chaos. The passengers clutched their seats, screaming, praying, unaware that their salvation rested on the small, hidden figure beneath the cockpit. Evie's hands hovered over the final manual switches. Sweat streamed down her face, dripping onto the wires and panels. Her arms trembled, every muscle ached, every breath felt borrowed. Yet she continued, overriding, rerouting, compensating, stabilizing. "Now, Captain Flare," she whispered. Harris pulled back on the yoke. The nose lifted slightly. The wheels kissed the runway. Sparks flew from the landing gear, friction burning against the tarmac. The plane trembled violently, but it held. "Brake slowly, maintain balance." Evie's voice was strained but precise. The plane decelerated, tires screaming, engines whining. Every second felt like an eternity. Outside, emergency crews lined the runway, sirens blaring, lights flashing. Inside, passengers clung to seats, some crying, some praying, some staring in disbelief. The aircraft finally came to a trembling stop. Silence, brief, fragile, electric, descended. Harris exhaled shakily, body trembling. We made it. Ghost, you saved us." Evie allowed herself a long, shaky exhale, collapsing slightly onto the maintenance hatch floor. Her small body was slick with sweat, bruises and scrapes visible on her arms and knees. Her gray eyes, though exhausted, were alive, burning with quiet triumph. You were the only reason we're alive," Harris whispered, staring at the hatch in awe. Evie's lips curved into a small, exhausted smile. "For now, yes, but this is only the beginning." The co-pilot muttered, pale and shaken. I don't even know what to say, she's incredible." Evie shook her head slightly, voice firm despite exhaustion. "Not incredible, necessary, and barely enough." Harris's eyes widened as he realized the truth. The initiative had erased her existence, tried to bury her, but here she was, alive, unbroken, proving why she had been trained. 14 years old, but capable of actions that could have challenged the best adult pilots in the world. Evie slowly climbed from the hatch, wincing as her small body protested. Captain Harris helped her up. You You saved lives today that no one else could. You're extraordinary." Her gray eyes met his, sharp and unyielding. "Not extraordinary, Ghost. Remember that. And remember, we survive because we trust each other. That's all that matters." Outside, passengers began to unbuckle, crying, hugging, thanking the crew. They had no idea of the small, hidden hero beneath the cockpit who had orchestrated their survival. But Harris knew. He had watched, heart in his throat, as a 14-year-old had defied every law of physics, probability, and human endurance. Evie stepped out of the maintenance hatch, trembling, exhausted, but alive. Captain Harris guided her to a seat, insisting she drink water, take deep breaths, steady herself. She allowed herself a brief moment to feel the weight of her achievement, to realize she had saved 186 lives. The co-pilot muttered again, voice shaking. "I've never seen anything like this. A child saving a plane, saving all of us." Evie's gray eyes flicked to him, piercing and unwavering. "Not a child, Ghost, and always remember that." Harris watched as the emergency crews approached and passengers slowly began evacuating. He realized something profound. This girl, erased from the world, was more than a prodigy, more than a hero. She was a living testament to human potential, courage, and determination. And for the first time, he allowed himself to feel something he hadn't dared in hours: hope. Evie slumped into her seat, exhausted but alive. Sweat soaked her hair, bruises marked her arms, but her eyes were alive, sharp, commanding. She had survived impossible odds. She had saved lives, and the world for now was safe. Harris's voice was quiet, reverent. "Ghost, you changed everything today. You saved all of us, and the world will never forget you." Evie's lips curved into a small, weary smile. "The world erased me once. Maybe it will this time too, but it won't matter. Lives were saved, that's enough." The passengers were slowly escorted off the plane, still unaware of the hidden hero beneath the cockpit. Harris and the co-pilot remained, staring at the hatch, knowing that no words could capture what had just occurred. Evie Carter, Ghost, was 14 years old. She was small, unseen, erased by history, but she had done what no one else could. She had faced impossible odds, defied logic and probability, and emerged victorious. And as the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm, golden glow over the tarmac, Captain Harris realized one undeniable truth. Heroes come in all sizes, and sometimes the smallest among us carry the heaviest burdens. Ghost had saved them all, and in that moment, even if the world never knew her name, it didn't matter. She was alive, she was unbroken, and she was a hero.